Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Dresden. My name is Whitney, and welcome to my first reading vlog, my themed reading vlog. I really enjoy, I don't really watch them too often because I don't really watch vlog style videos too often, but I know a lot of booktubers do like themed vlogs, which I find really interesting, and I have a bunch of books that kind of follow a theme and go along with each other, and I figure this is a great way to get through some of those books as well, and kind of a little bit last minute put this first one together, but I knew I wanted to do it because June 19th is Juneteenth, which is the day slavery was abolished, and so I really wanted to read books for that. So that's kind of not necessarily the theme of slavery, but historical Black authors, essentially, is kind of what we're going with. I'm actually going to be reading 3 Octavia E. Butler novels, because only one of them was originally planned as part of this themed vlog, but then I learned that Parable of a Sower actually takes place from June 2024 through 2027. And so I was like, it would be perfect to start that in June 2024. Well, start and read it. I'm not going to read it over 3 years, but I was like, that would be perfect to start in June 2024 and read it. And so I don't have that one yet. It is on its way to me. And then I do participate in Kim from Expedition Through Pages, her Tales from Two Trails game. And the group read is Wild Seed by Octavia E. Butler. And so I was like, well, it fits in here too. And then I don't have the dust jacket for this one, but I do have Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler. And so I'm going to be reading this one as well, because it works. And then I am going to add in 2 other books. Most of the themed vlogs are going to have 3 to 4 books. This one obviously is going to have 5. So I also want to go ahead and read The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This movie, the original one, not the newest one, was one we watched all the time when I was young. And so, yeah, very familiar, but I've never actually read the book. So that's going to be part. And then I also have Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora, Neale, Hurston. So I'm going to be reading this as well. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to all of these, especially the Octavia E. Butler. I read Kindred in April and absolutely loved it. It was the top book of the month. It was fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to trying 3 others of her works, and then doing the other 2 books as well. I'm going to start with Wild Seed because I have a bunch of chores I need to get to. It is June 2nd. Sunday. I'm going to try to read them all this week, but some might spill over into the next week. We'll just have to see. And so you're seeing this a couple days before Juneteenth, the 19th. So, yeah, I'm going to start with Wild Seed. Basically, from the synopsis, you have 2 immortals, and it's kind of like a power struggle love story between them. And it crosses from Africa to the United States, like 17th century Africa to 19th century United States. So it spans like a long range of time and then goes across continents as well. Basically, you have Doro, who can possess bodies, and he's kind of lonely, so he jumps from body to body, keeping himself alive. He's kind of lonely, so he ends up breeding supernaturally gifted humans to then kind of build an empire with them. And then you have Anyanwu, and she can heal with a bite and reverse aging. And so she kind of creates this community around her as well, like a tribe of people around her. And then when they meet each other, like Doro covets Anyanwu. And then, like I said, it's kind of like a power struggle, and it just spans time. So I'm really looking forward to it. I wasn't familiar with this one at all until Kim suggested it as a book read, so it sounds like a lot of fun, or a group read rather. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be listening to it while I do some chores, and I will check back in with kind of my first thoughts on it when I kind of get to a stopping point. So I will be back in just a moment. All right, so I listened to about 6 hours and 20-ish minutes, a little less of Wild Seed today. I have almost 5 hours left to go, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I When I'm listening, audiobooks are hard for me because I do tend to like kind of zone in and out of them, but so far I'm enjoying it. I like the narrator, which is a plus because sometimes the narrator makes or breaks the story, and I do like the narrator. Um, it kind of deals with, so Doro is not a likable character at all. He like is basically breeding people as if they're cattle, essentially. It does deal with slavery. Starting off, you're in Africa and slave trade and all that. So it does deal with slavery. And then he brings Anyanwu, who is the other main character, he brings her across to America. And then right now where I'm at, it has jumped ahead. And so now you have Anyanwu's, some of the children and such. And yeah, Doro basically wants to own her. And when people are no longer useful to him, he has no problem killing them. And so there's kind of that, like, he's just breeding people and he's kind of enslaving people too. And so that's a bit rough, but it makes sense for the character. And then there's this incestuous thing going on that again is not enjoyable, but it makes sense for the character and for the story. So I don't mind reading dislikable characters or things if it makes sense for the story. It's not just done for kind of shock value. And it does kind of make sense for the story, and that's kind of the whole point. So basically, he's cultivating these people, and he's looking for supernatural abilities. And so when he finds people like Anyanwu, that he hasn't bred, they're called Wild Seed. And so that's kind of where the name of the story comes from. And so yeah, I'm about halfway through. I was playing World of Warcraft with my husband for the beginning of it, and then I was organizing some books. I'm reorganizing my shelves because uh, I've just been piling books as I either haul them or I finish reading them. And so, like, authors aren't together and things like that. And so I got all my children's books done. And so I was listening to that, but I'm tired, so I'm done with that. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to be done listening to it for today. And then tomorrow I have some chores and such I need to do, like the cat boxes and laundry and such. So I'll definitely listen to it tomorrow. The bathrooms, like just little chores around the house. So I'll definitely be listening to it tomorrow. I'm hoping I can finish it tomorrow since I do have 5 hours. If I'm done with chores and I still have more to listen to, I'll probably just do like an activity while I listen to it. But so far, like, I'm still enjoying it. I definitely probably missed some things because I'm listening to it. And so I would eventually like to get like a physical copy and reread it at some point. But right now, yeah, like I said, it's kind of rough because he's not a likable character. And the whole incestuous thing is like, what's going on here? So definitely keep that in mind if it might be something that's triggering for you, if you plan on reading it. But yeah, I mean, if it fits the story, and as long as something fits the story, I don't mind reading something distasteful like that. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. So I will pop back in tomorrow once I am done with Wild Seed, and I'll let you know what I'm reading next. But for now, I'm gonna sign off, and I'll be back in just a second for you guys. Alright, it is Monday, June 3rd, and I just finished Wild Seed. And I'm going to try to keep this spoiler light, but I really do want to talk about my thoughts and such. So there is going to be a little bit of spoilers. So in Wild Seed, basically, you have Doro, and he's what's considered a spirit, and so he basically has to take men's bodies in order to live, men or women, human bodies in order to live, and such. And so you have him, and he's basically trying to find people with like special abilities and kind of create all these like different places where he has a group of people which he kind of is in control of that have these supernatural abilities. And then you have Anyanwu, and he meets her in Africa, and she has the ability to kind of reverse aging, and then she also has the ability to heal not only herself but others, and she can like shapeshift and change into other humans, or like if she comes into contact with an animal, then she can shapeshift into that animal too. Once she like they ate dolphin, and then she could become a dolphin, and she can become like a cougar and such. And so she has this ability, and but she's kind of created like a tribe around her as well, of like her sons and daughters and such. And people, they're superstitious and a little bit fearful of her, but they kind of accept her essentially. So a community. And he ends up talking her into going to America. So they leave Africa, and this is like 16th century Africa. He went to check on one of his group of people, and found that they had been wiped out by like slavers and such. And so they go to America, and basically he entraps her. And so it's following them through like 16th century from Africa, and then they go to America and all the way up until just before the Civil War. And so, yeah, it's following them all through that time. And she's basically trapped. And he uses this called wild seed because he's breeding these people like their livestock. But she wasn't bred by him. He found her in the wild, but she has supernatural abilities, so he wants to add her and then others like her, which he comes across. They're wild seed because he finds them. He doesn't breed them, but he adds them to his breeding stock, basically. And slavery does play like a big part, like not a huge part because it's more about him and her, but he's basically a slaver of these different people, and he's using them as breeding stock as well. Like that's all they're worth, and like once they're of no more value to him, like they can't breed anymore or whatever, he tends to just kill them. And so yeah, it's supposed to be like a love story, and throughout the whole thing, like Anyanwu sticks with her morals. She's like, I don't appreciate, what you're doing is wrong. It's an abomination, because he's breeding also like siblings to each other and such. And so she's just like, this is not okay. And then you're killing these people who are so loyal to you as well. And he does have to kill. Like, he needs to kill. He can't not kill. And so he has to kill, but it's like, but you're killing your people that are loyal to you once they're of no more use. And he has no remorse, like, not bothered by what he's doing. He doesn't see it as wrong at all. And so that's rough, but it really fit the story. The writing is fantastic. I listened to it, so the narration was fantastic as well. And it was really good. And there's some other characters, like he has his one son who is kind of like cream of the crop, basically. And so he has him, and that's a really great character. But I'm really frustrated with how it ended. And such, because it's just like toxic is toxic, and this is not a love story. I'm sorry. Like, but she does stick to her guns throughout the whole book. Like, she sticks to it throughout the whole book. And he doesn't really have like a character arc until towards the end, like any character growth at all till towards the end. But it was really frustrating because it's like, this is not okay. Like, he's still toxic. Like, he is toxic and he's horrible, and he's used and abused you for hundreds of years at this point. Like, how can you even think to forgive him at all? or fall in love with him. And I get, like Stockholm syndrome and such, it's a thing, but like the fact she knows, like, and she doesn't like it. But I mean, I guess like he's been in her life for all these hundreds of years, and he's like the one constant there. But it's just like no, because she's basically also using, he's breeding them, and she's forced to sleep with him or sleep with people he assigns to her. Like he pairs people up and they're forced to create offspring together. And then she's forced to lay with him whenever he wants as well. And it's so frustrating, like how it's presented as a love story, but it also made sense. Like it wasn't just for like shock value or anything. It really made sense for the people involved, the characters involved, and the story itself. So I ended up giving it 5 stars just because, as mad as I am, like it wasn't just done, as shock value. It didn't feel like it really made sense for the characters, and kind of their journey. It did make sense. So as mad as I am, I'm like, you know what? It makes sense. It is part of a series. It's the first in the series. I don't know how many books are in the series. I'll try to look it up and include that here. But I don't think I'm going to continue on with the series. But I did like, it was a good choice for kind of this Juneteenth vlog. Even though slavery was kind of just in the background throughout the whole thing, and it was really more about these two people and what he was doing. I mean, he's, like I said, he's kind of a spirit god creature thing. But yeah, I really did think it was well written, and I liked the narration, and I really enjoyed the story itself. So I did give it 5 stars, but I'm so mad. I don't think I would continue on with the series at all. Maybe if it's only one more book, maybe I'll see. Like I said, it ended at the point of the Civil War, and so maybe I'll see what happens afterwards. But yeah, it was just really, really frustrating. Kind of that love story element to it, because it's like he's an extremely, extremely, extremely toxic man. like there's nothing redeemable about him whatsoever. And yeah, he has growth at the end for reasons which I'm not gonna spoil right here. Like I said, I'm trying to keep it spoiler light while still really sharing my thoughts. But yeah, it was just so toxic. But anyway, next up, I'm going to go read, I'm going to kind of, since I'm reading 3 Octavia E. Butlers, I'm going to do the other 2 in between and kind of break them up. So I'm going to go with Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I've never read this, and so yeah, I love this cover. I think it's such a beautiful cover. But this one says, one of the most important works of 20th century American literature, Zora Neale Hurston's beloved 1937 classic, Their Eyes Were Watching God, is an enduring Southern love story sparkling with wit, beauty, and heartfelt wisdom, told in the captivating voice of a woman who refuses to live in sorrow, bitterness, fear, or foolish romantic dreams. It is the story of a fair-skinned, fiercely independent Janie Crawford and her evolving selfhood through 3 marriages and a life marked by poverty, trials, and purpose. A true literary wonder, Hurston's masterwork remains as relevant and affecting today as when it was first published. Perhaps the most widely read and highly regarded novel in the entire canon of African American literature. So yeah, hopefully any love interests here aren't as toxic, but we'll just have to see how this one plays out. But I am excited to read this. So this one, I have some computer work to do, so I probably won't start this one till this evening. It's about 2 p.m. right now, and so it is short. It is really, really short, so I'm hoping I can get it done tonight, but if not, I should be able to finish it up in the morning, and so I should check back in with you guys tomorrow. But of course, for you guys, it'll be just a moment, so I'll be right back. Alright, it is now Wednesday, June 5th, and I have finished Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I finished this morning. I ended up being on the computer all day Monday up until bedtime. Read about 15 pages before I went to sleep, but I was just really super tired. And so I read the bulk of it yesterday and then finished it off this morning. I had about 40 pages left to go this morning. And yeah, I really struggled with this one at first. Like, she uses like the dialect of the people, and so I did struggle to get into that. I enjoyed that part. I love when authors kind of use like bring that dialect across. I really enjoy that in books, but I do struggle to comprehend in general because I am autistic, and so it took me a bit to get into the rhythm of that. But that really wasn't what I struggled with. It was really the main character. So her grandma was a slave, and so she wants her granddaughter to marry kind of somebody wealthy and kind of be a little bit higher class and pampered and such. And so she actually ends up arranging a marriage for Janie. And so ends up married 3 times. And the first marriage, the guy's a really good guy, but she has like no love for him or anything like that. And he wants her to work the land with him. And she's like, no, I'm here, to take care of the house. Like, she's very much like, we have our roles in this relationship, and I'm here to take care of the house. And so then she meets Joe and ends up running off with Joe and marrying Joe. And Joe has like higher aspirations, and so he ends up going to this black town and he wants to make something of it. So he ends up buying a large parcel of land and bringing people in and building a store and a post office, and just kind of raising. But he really puts Janie down a lot, and is very like emotionally abusive, and then does become physically abusive. That part's not very graphic. Like, it is mentioned, but it's not very graphic or anything like that. So if that's something that might be triggering for you, keep it in mind, but it doesn't like go into detail or anything. And so she's any little mistake she makes, because he makes her run the store and such, and any little mistake she makes, he just puts her down. And like, she wants to be part of the town, but he basically kind of wants like a trophy wife. And so she's kind of like on the outskirts of this town. And that's the section that I really, really struggled with, because you're kind of, it's told both in third and first person. It kind of goes back and forth. And even in third person, you're kind of expecting it to follow the main character, and you're kind of expecting to get like their thoughts and their emotions. Well, that's not the case. Like, it's very much like she's kind of on the outside over here, and she's kind of mentioned occasionally, but it's a lot of dialogue between like the town characters, which I don't really like. A lot of dialogue in books. I want that context and such added. And so I struggled with that. Plus, she's using the dialect too. And so it's a lot of dialogue with this different dialect that I'm not used to. And it's following this town, and it's just, these people, and he's kind of raising this town, and you don't really see Janie. And looking back on it now that I finished the book, like, the author was very clever in that way, because Joe kept Janie on the outskirts, and you didn't really see her. Like, she was just pushed so far down. And so it was kind of clever, that use, but I was a struggle to read it for sure. And then he, 20 years or so with Joe. And then she ends up meeting Tea Cake, and Tea Cake is much younger than her. And she's supposed to be mourning Joe. It's been 9 months at this point when she kind of takes up with Tea Cake, but the town people are kind of like looking down on her, one, because, oh, that's disrespectful to your previous husband, and two, like, he's so much younger than her. So they end up leaving town and going down, and it takes place in Florida. And so yeah, then it's about them, and Tea Cake, he doesn't care about. She's rich because of Joe. He definitely, built something and had a lot of money to leave her. But he doesn't care about that. He wants to earn the money. He's like, you just put that in the bank and we'll live off whatever I can earn. And then there ends up being a hurricane, and so they're, kind of trying to survive this hurricane. And then rabies comes into play, which it always kind of gives me like the chills, but I'm always really interested in stories, historical stories that incorporate rabies. I find it really, really interesting. And so, yeah, that comes into play as well. And then, she ends up back into this town that Joe had built and where she lived for so many years. And there was cute moments, like there's this mule that's kind of like the town mascot, and that was kind of cute. Like there was cute moments in the town, but I really liked her and Tea Cake, and you really see her blossom with Tea Cake. And so it really picked up there, and I ended up enjoying it. I did go with 4 stars on this one, just because like half the book I really struggled with, and it wasn't until the last half that I really started to enjoy it. So I did only give it 4 stars. I considered 3 stars because it was such a struggle in the beginning, but it is very cleverly written, and so I really enjoyed that aspect. And it's really interesting because it doesn't really deal with slavery itself, um, but you do see how like that kind of bled in to, yeah, now they're free, but there's obviously still racism and prejudice and such. But how her grandma, in wanting her to have this life where she didn't have to work and struggle and such, kind of pushed her into this life where she was miserable and not happy. And you see her later on with Tea Cake, and she's still kind of somewhat in that mindset. And then he's coming from work to spend time with her, and it's taking away from his work. And so he's like, if you don't want me to come and take away from work, then you should come out with me. And she's like, I'll come out with you. Like, I have no problem working. And some of the other colored folks thought she was just, you know, high and mighty. And she's like, no, I'm perfectly fine to come and work. And we see that, she shows back up into town where she was the mayor's wife in these overalls instead of like the nice dresses she wore and such. And she's just in these overalls coming back into town. And so you kind of see that transition. And it was really like interesting, really cleverly written. I'm really glad I read this. As big of a struggle as it was at first. Like, definitely well worth it to pick up. And so the next book, I'm going back to Octavia E. Butler. And another thing, before I jump into that one, is it has this little blurb. It says, there's no more important book to me than this one, and that's by Alice Walker. And I kind of read the foreword, and I read a little bit of the afterword. And it talks about how Alice Walker took inspiration, and some other female Black authors took inspiration from Zora and Neale Hurston's style and literary style and such. So I am going to be reading A Colored Purple by Alice Walker, but it kind of all ties together, which I love. So the next one I'm going to be picking up is Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler. And this one, I don't know how much like slavery is going to tie in or anything like that. This one is actually one of her, I think it said on Goodreads that it was her last novel. I don't fully know. But it was published in 2005. And this one is about a young girl who has amnesia, and she discovers she kind of has like these inhuman needs and abilities, and she discovers she's actually a 53-year-old vampire, and so she's trying to learn about her past life and what she can't remember, and then there's also somebody who's out to destroy her, that she's trying to learn who wants to destroy her, and so yeah, it's about a vampire, and I'm excited to read this. Like, I know I didn't probably do the synopsis justice because I don't have the dust jacket and I'm trying to just go off memory, which I have a horrible memory. But yeah, I am excited to read this, and we'll see, how much, like, maybe slavery or just the Black experience ties into this. I'm not entirely sure, but I've been enjoying Octavia E. Butler's writing. And so I'm going to read this one next, and then we're going to go to The Color Purple, and then back to her, to Octavia E. Butler. So I'm going to go. I have trees getting water and such, so I got to take care of that. I'm going to spend the rest of the day reading. I got a lot of chores done, the beginning of the week. It's Wednesday now. So I'm just going to kind of take today, I'm going to water the trees and then take the rest of the day to read. I'm hoping I can read this during the day. My problem is I have trouble focusing during the day, so I don't get near as much read during the day as I do at night. But I'm hoping I can finish this one up today, early evening, and then start on The Color Purple tonight. But we'll just see how it goes. Of course, you guys will know in just a moment. But I will check back in with you when maybe either halfway or when I'm done with this. We'll just have to see, but I'll be back in a moment. All right, so it is still the 5th, Wednesday the 5th, and I just wanted to jump on. It's only about 5 o'clock. I haven't read a whole lot of this. I'm 60 pages in, but I just wanted to jump on and share my thoughts real quick because this is kind of like irksome a little bit, but basically, so you have the main character, and her body is only like 10 or 11. And she's a vampire, obviously. And in the synopsis, it says that she learns that she's actually 53. So she's actually older, and obviously she has amnesia, but she's picking things up. But she gets picked up by this guy. And I don't know how old he is exactly, but probably in his 20s. But they start an intimate relationship, and that is just like she's in a body of a 10 to 11-year-old. And yeah, she's a vampire, she acts older and such, so it's just really like definitely trigger warning for that. It's really frustrating, but I really like the writing of this, and I think it definitely speaks to the way Octavia E. Butler writes things, because in Wild Seed as well, like you had Doro, and he's basically using these people as cattle, breeding brothers and sisters together and such, and like this disgusting thing, and she doesn't write it so like trying to like make it okay. Like I read some books where it's something like darker or just disgusting, and they're like trying to make it okay and justify it. She doesn't do that, and it just, the way she writes is really, really good. And I did read the little foreword in this as well. And this was Octavia Butler's last work. When she passed, she was actually working on the sequel to this. So this was her last work. And yeah, it's really interesting so far. And the intro, I forget who wrote the intro, I can tell you though. I'm not familiar with them. Nissy Shaw. They, talk about how, it's really about this young Black kid really finding their power. And so it kind of has that duplicity. Like it's a vampire novel, but it has that duplicity of for young Black kids and them finding their power. And so it's going to be interesting to really get further into it. She talks about how, or they talk about in the intro how, like in the novel, in this book itself, how they use the Black component to, like the genetic component, to make her more resistant to the sun. And so like other vampires aren't cool, like they are either like kind of jealous of it, or they don't like her because she's Black. And so the kind of that aspect as well, that prejudice there. And so yeah, I am enjoying it so far, but it is kind of hard to read because of that inappropriate relationship. Even though she's a vampire, she's older, she's in the body of a 10 to 11-year-old. So it's really frustrating that aspect, but otherwise I am really enjoying it so far. I haven't read a whole lot today. As I mentioned, I don't do well during the day. Like it's just bright and it's just noisy. I don't know how to describe. My autistic brain just does not like the daytime, and so I always read better at night. And so I'm hoping I can get a good chunk of this, if not all of it, read tonight. But I probably won't check back in until tomorrow, and then I need to go in the store in the morning. So we'll just see what time it is when I finish this. I was hoping to read a lot more today than I have, and I just didn't. But I mean, those 60 pages, they're reading quickly. When I do like sit down and read, like I'll check the page count when I kind of stop for something and go, oh, I read a good chunk. But I keep zoning out in between little like chunks of like 10 pages or so. So like, yeah, so I'll be back when I do finish it with my further thoughts. But I just wanted to kind of jump on here by the intro and kind of my first impressions of the book, because it is hard. And like I said, with Wild Seed too, it was like this disgusting thing, but just the way she writes and such, she's a fantastic writer. I definitely plan on picking up a lot more Octavia E. Butler books for sure. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave you right now. I'll jump back on. You'll see me in just a moment. Alright, it is Thursday, June 6th. It's about 10 p.m. at night. And I did finally finish Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler. This author is just like, the way these books are written is just so amazing. And she takes like these hard, disgusting things that people do to each other and writes them in such a way that she doesn't justify it or try to make it okay, but really makes it a part of the story. And this is probably the one where she doesn't justify it, but you have Shori and her body is like 10 or 11 in human years, but she's been alive for 53 years because she's a vampire, but she's still a child by vampire standards. But at the same time, like emotionally and such, she's not a child by human standards, if that makes sense. And so she doesn't justify it, but the way she, incorporates that into the story just really works. And it's just less disturbing than what it could be, I guess. And you still kind of have that like, but in her other two books I read Kindred back in March, April, maybe? I don't remember exactly when. I think April. And and there was slavery, and the main character, was going back in time in that one. I don't know why I'm holding this up. I'll sit down. But she was going back in time, and she had this connection with her ancestor who was, originally started off as a boy, but, then grew into a man over the years and such, and did despicable things, but she had that connection to him. So that was a hard topic because he's a slaver and the things he's doing and the way he's treating her like are not okay, but you kind of understand why she has that connection. And then the same thing in Wild Seed, which I listened to at the beginning of this vlog. Doro does despicable things. He's treating these people like they're cattle to be bred and such. And she's taking that and she's, again, not justifying it, but just presenting it of how it is. And then you have Anyanwu, who, was like, this is not okay. This is an abomination and such. And you kind of understand, like, even in the end, like, where Anyanwu is coming from. And, like, her connection to Doro, even though Doro's doing the despicable things. And in this case, like, the sexual aspect is very much part of the vampirism. And so the symbionts are more the ones being taken advantage of than she is as the vampire. And so it's really this kind of interesting dynamic. And with this one, you have, so she has amnesia because her family was attacked. And so the vampires, they live in all female and all male communities, and then they mate with each other. But they don't live, males and females don't live together. So her mother's family gets attacked and dies. And then a little bit of a spoiler here. She does find her father's family. Then the same thing happens to them. And so these people are targeting her and her family. And so they're kind of on the run, and they're trying to figure out, like, she has no memory, and the guy she meets in the beginning, her symbiont, who's an adult, a 23-year-old male, and they have a sexual relationship and such, like, he doesn't know anything about vampires. Or, like, he's brand new to this too, so he doesn't know. And then there's these other characters that come in who are symbionts of her father's people, and they know, and so they're able to teach her somewhat, but they're not vampires, which are called Innas. Inya? Inya? Inna? Inna? I think it's Inna. Anyway, so they don't fully know, but they know more than she does. And so they're able to kind of teach her, and teach her first symbiont what he needs to know as a symbiote, because she can't teach him and tell him the way it is. And so it's really kind of this interesting dynamic. And you forget often that she's in this child body, because mentally she's not a child, and that really comes across. And so then I really like how, again, kind of getting into spoiler territory here without trying to give too much away, but in the end it comes down to, like, this council of judgments, and they're judging the people that have, or the vampires that have done this to her family and such. And it's really interesting the way she tied in, like, the black racism and prejudice and such, because that comes across a little bit, like, they say things, but that's not, like, the crux of the problem. And so she does tie that in a little bit, but you also you kind of wonder, like, if, because she's been genetically modified with human DNA. So she's allowed to walk in the sunlight, but part of that is because it's black human DNA. So that melanin is what helps her be able to walk in the sunlight a little bit. She still gets burned and everything, but it's just really, really, really interesting the way she tied that in. But even without that component, like the color of her skin, just the fact, like, that humans are less than nothing. They're not human to these vampires, and that's kind of how whites have treated slaves and black people in general, like with their racism, that they're less than human. And so these vampires are treating her that, like, she's less than them because she has that human DNA. And then, like I said, it does kind of tie back into the color of her skin and such, and black history in general. But just, there's so much more depth to this than I can really get at, especially it's late at night and I'm kind of tired. I had to go into town today, so that always frazzles my brain a little bit. But there's just a lot of depth to this and a lot of nuance. That this is an author I would love. I used to do, like, discussion questions. If you're new to my channel, when I first started, I would choose a book of the month, and that book I would come up with discussion questions and then, answer them and such. And this is an author I would love to do that with, because her books are so nuanced, and there's so much depth to them. And this is such a shame that she did pass and that this was her last book, because I would have loved to get more of the story. And it clearly, where it ends, like, it's not really a cliffhanger. It does wrap up, but it leaves it open enough for more, and unfortunately we're never going to get that. But yeah, this author is just so amazing. Obviously, they give this 5 stars. It was unfortunate, like, this one had several, like, little editing issues, um, which kind of took me out of the story because there would be a word that wasn't quite right. Like, I think one, it was supposed to be they, and it was that. And so I would have, wait, did I read that right? So there was that kind of throughout the story. It wasn't edited very well, but that's not, the author's fault. Obviously, that's the editing. But yeah, absolutely 5 stars. Absolutely love this. And I can't wait. I'm going to be reading Parable of a Sower by her as well. And so I'm really looking forward to that. But before I get to that one, my next book is going to be The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I'm really excited. I've never read this book, but I've seen the movie several times. We had it growing up, and I've seen it several times. The old one with Whoopi Goldberg, not the newest adaptation. So I'm excited to read this one, especially because this one does tie back into Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora and Neale Hurston, which of course I read. And so yeah, I'm really excited for this one. I'm going to go ahead. Let's see. This says, this is the story of 2 sisters, one a missionary in Africa and the other a child wife living in the South, who sustain their loyalty to and trust in each other across time, distance, and silence. Beautifully imagined and deeply compassionate, this classic novel of American literature is rich with passion, pain, inspiration, and an indomitable love of life. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this since I am familiar with, of course, the original adaptation movie. So that's what I'm going to be reading next. I do plan on starting it tonight. I don't know how far I'll get to it. It looks like this told a lot through like little letters and such. And so, like, Dear God, and that one's like short. It's just one one page. And so yeah, this one I'm really looking forward to. It should be a quick read, and I'm hoping I can read. I mean, it's 10 o'clock at night. Generally, I stay up till about 12, depending on how tired I am. And because I went into town, I am a little bit wired. I always am after going into town. And I did have caffeine today, which is always a bad idea for me. I should not have caffeine at all because I already have trouble sleeping. So I'll most likely read for a couple hours before I actually go to sleep. And so we'll just see how much I can get done. I'll probably check in with you in the morning and just see how far I am and give you kind of my first thoughts. And so yeah, I'll be back for you. It'll be just a moment, and of course for me it'll be tomorrow. Alright, it is the morning of Friday, June 7th. I'm only about 61 pages into The Color Purple. I read a little bit last night before I went to sleep. And it definitely jumps right in there, which I wasn't expecting. I knew it dealt with abuse and such, but it jumps right in. Like, her first passage is basically her father assaulting her. But the way she says it, it's not like graphic or anything like that. You know what's going on. But yeah, it's a really heavy book even so far, but I'm to the point where Cecily ends up getting married off to this guy who was trying to get her sister. And her dad was like, no, you can't have her. You can have Celie. And so she gets married off to him, and he has this mistress who's a singer, and she's really likes the singer. And so the mistress ends up getting sick and coming to stay with them. So that's kind of where the point I'm at. And her husband beats her and everything. And yeah, she's just really missing her sister. And it is definitely different from the movie. I mean, the things that are happening were definitely in the movie, but the movie is definitely more dramatized, where this is from Celie's viewpoint. And she just, like, when her sister left, like, it wasn't like in the movie where she was dragged away, she was just told she needs to get out of here. And so, yeah, it's definitely a little bit different. But Celie just is such a positive person. Like, I'm not saying like she doesn't get upset by what's happening to her. She doesn't get upset about the way her father treated her. She doesn't get upset about the beating she gets. And the only time you see her really get upset is when she's worried for her sister. She's worried that her father's gonna turn his attentions on her sister, and she's like, use me instead. Like, don't go after her. But as far as whatever happens with her, she just kind of just goes with it. And it's hard to see that, and a lot of other women in her life are like, you need to fight, like, fight. But that's not who she is. So I'm really excited to continue on. It is told like she's just little snippets talking to God, and then later on I think she does talk to her sister. But yeah, just like little snippets, so it's really easy to read really fast. So I'm pretty confident, as long as my brain doesn't completely go kaput, that I can finish this during the day today and then jump on to my last book for this vlog. But so yeah, so far very, very heavy. But I'm looking forward to see kind of how it evolves, especially the friendship between her and Suga. And so I think that's her name. The singer. Her and the singer. Because right now the singer still's kind of treating her a little bit rough. But you definitely see that relationship starting to kind of bloom between them. And even her and her husband are finding kind of a common ground because of the singer as well. So that's kind of my first thoughts right now. I am going to go get some breakfast and make myself some coffee, decaf. I had enough caffeine yesterday, so I'm gonna go do that and then dive right in, and I'll be back in just a moment for you guys. Alright, it is the evening of Friday, June 7th, and I finally finished The Color Purple. It's almost 10 o'clock at night. I don't know why I can't focus. I mean, I do know why I can't focus during the day, but I really wish I could, because I read the bulk of this evening. It During the day I didn't make very much progress at all. But yeah, I started off a little bit slow. I mean, it starts off with a bang. Like, immediately she's being assaulted by her father. So it does start off like it jumps right in, but then it kind of slows down and the pacing's a little bit slow. But it really works for this type of stories, and it's just her, Celie, throughout her life. From the time she's, first assaulted from her father and gets married off as a teenager to a guy, and then, her life with him, and then she meets Shug, who is basically the man she's married to, his mistress, and they start forming a really close relationship, and then that blossoms into like a sexual relationship, and you really see like Celie grow throughout this time, and it's all told like in letter form. So first she's kind of writing letters to God, and then she's writing to her sister, who she doesn't know whether her sister's alive or dead or not. At first she thinks she's dead, and so it's told through letter form, and you really see her grow, like both her writing style and then her thoughts and her processes and such. And you just see her blossom, and it's really just beautiful to see, because and even when she's being abused and taken, like, she has like this kind of steadfastness, I guess. And yeah, she gets upset and such, but she just kind of this is my, she just goes through life. And she doesn't really let it beat her down, but she never really accepts it either. Like, it's just such a great character. And then that sisterhood, and then like this relationship. I mean, they're sort of related by marriage and such, but it definitely is like there's a lot of like different people coming in, and it definitely is kind of like a found family aspect in a way. And even throughout her abuse, like, she finds forgiveness. Like, her and her abusive husband end up being friends at the end of it. And because of Shug and the kind of love triangle that is that whole situation. You really see her husband in a different light. Like, he's this horrible person to her, but with Shug, he's completely different. And so, she's able to see him through that different light a little bit too. And I think that might help with her forgiveness. And then you also get her sister's side of it, and she's over in Africa as a missionary. So you get that side of it. And slavery definitely, why isn't a big part, it is talked about as part of their history and how that history has kind of affected them, and especially like the missionary work in Africa. Like, these Africans are the ones that sold them into slavery as well, like some of the tribes they're working with and such. It's just an absolutely beautiful story, the way it's told. It does have, so with their eyes were watching God, she kind of did it, I think in the, I don't even know if I'm using the right word or not, but in the foreword or whatever, it talks about how it's the vernacular. I call it the dialect. I don't know what's right. And that is definitely present in here as well, but not as strongly as in this one. Like, this one, there's like certain words, and like instead of we, she says us, and things like that, and that's mentioned too because somebody's trying to teach her to speak more proper. And yeah, it's just not as heavy as it was in Their Eyes Were Watching God. And obviously, two different authors, but Alice Walker and other authors have taken inspiration from Zora and Neale Hurston. And so I like that it was there. Like I said, I do like that. But because it wasn't as heavy, it was a little bit more accessible, which I did appreciate. But yeah, absolutely beautiful. It's not quite like when you watch the movie, or at least the Whoopi Goldberg, the old movie, I don't know about the new one. Like I said, there are some dramatic scenes like where she's being pulled apart from her sister, and it's not quite as dramatic here. And like it's more reference to, it's not, the abuse and such isn't quite as graphic. But yeah, just an absolutely wonderful book. So I am done with that. I gave it 5 stars. I think all of them have been 5 stars except for Their Eyes Were Watching God, but I gave that one 4 stars. So lastly, the one we're finishing off with is going to be Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. And one thing I did want to mention also, this one, it kind of ends the end of June / 4th of July. And so that was nice. And there was another part where it specifically mentions June. So it's like perfect. Because one of the reasons I want to read this one is it's supposed to start in June of 2024. And so I was like, I really want to add this one into this themed vlog and read it because it starts in June of 2024. And this one was written, let's see here, it says 1993. So yeah, it definitely was written, and this was the future, but now we're here in 2024. So I'm really looking forward to this one. So this one says, when global climate change and an economic crisis lead to social chaos in the early 2020s, California becomes full of dangers, from pervasive water shortage to masses of vagabonds who will do anything to live to see another day. 15-year-old Lauren Olamina lives inside a gated community with her preacher father, family, and neighbors, sheltered from the surrounding anarchy. In a society where vulnerability is a risk, she suffers from hyperempathy, a debilitating sensitivity to others' emotions. Precocious and clear-eyed, Laura must make her voice heard in order to protect her loved ones from the imminent disasters her small community stubbornly ignores. But what begins as a fight for survival soon leads to something much more, the birth of a new faith and a startling vision of human destiny. So I'm excited to read this one. So far, I've loved every single Octavia E. Butler book I read, even when there's aspects that I don't like. And there's one more thing, I know I keep going back to this, but I'm all over the place. This one, so she's writing to God at first, but it's really more a spiritual relationship. And it's really interesting to see how her relationship with God evolved, and the missionaries in Africa too, how their relationship with God evolves and such, and it's really more spiritual than like organized religion and such, which I really loved as well. So I meant to mention that and I forgot. But anyway, So yeah, I'm excited to read this one. I think this is going to be a great one to end on. It's about 10 o'clock tonight. I'm not sure how far I'm going to get into this. It's just over, let's see, like 3. So it looks like it's 329 pages, 329 pages. So just over 300 pages. I'm not sure how much I'm going to get read tonight. I've been reading a book with my husband that I would like to read at least 1 to 2 chapters. So we'll just kind of see. But I'll probably check back in the morning depending on how far I am through this, and I'll definitely am planning on trying to read this tomorrow, but we'll just see what the day brings, because obviously I haven't been doing so hot. I was really hoping to get the color profile done during the day and read this evening, but obviously that did not happen because I'm horrible at reading through the day. Anyway, I'm going to leave you right here for the moment, but of course I'll be back in just a few seconds for you guys. Alright, it is the morning of Saturday, June 8th, and I read a little bit of Parable of the Sower last night, only about 30 pages, so not that much, but that first little chunk is the part that takes place in 2024, and it actually starts in July 2024. I got June because I was watching somebody else, I don't remember who, but they were going to be reading this and they said June. But it's actually July, the end of July, that this starts, 2024, like I said. And the first 30 pages, you're just kind of getting introduced to some of the characters. So you have, what's her name? Lauren. And her father is a Baptist preacher, is dystopian, obviously, and so they kind of live in this walled off community, and the first little bit they're going outside that community so her and some other kids can be baptized, and they basically have to buy water, and water is extremely expensive, and so like fuel's no longer used because all people are buying is water, so they ride like on bicycles and such. And it's very, very dangerous. Like, as she's driving, she sees a lot of just horrible things, murder, abuse, and such. And she has hyper empathy. And so basically, her father and her stepmom don't really believe that she is. Like, they're trying to just tell her to, like, don't feel what others feel and such. And her stepmom's Spanish, and so you have Spanish and then you have Black, but so far race hasn't really come into it, and so I'm not sure how big of a part that's going to play throughout the whole book. And it's very, like, her father's a Baptist preacher, so of course, you have that religious element, and then she kind of believes, like, this different, it's like the earth living seed or something like that. I'll try to find it here. Earthseed, the Books of Living. And so like the chapters start with like a little quote from that. And so yeah, so far interesting. Like the writing style, because I've enjoyed the writing style of all her other books, and so far this is pretty on par, but it is completely different from the other 3 books I've read by this author. So I'm not gonna read it right away today. I'm just not really in the mood to read. Typically on the weekend I don't read during the day. I read more in the evenings, and I either play like World of Warcraft with my husband or do something else. I am trying to reorganize my bookshelves. I got all my children's books reorganized, so I'm happy with that, but my other bookshelves still need to be revamped. And I've been really wanting to work on that. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. I'm not sure when I'll get to that. It might not be until bedtime. And so I'll give you guys an update when I'm further through it. I definitely want to finish it this weekend. That's kind of my goal. And so we'll see how much I get read today, and then tomorrow will just kind of depend on that. But for now, I am going to work on my book room, so I will check back in with you guys when I have something to report. Psych! I actually was thinking about it, and I was like, I wonder about getting the audiobook for this, because Wild Seed was actually free with my Audible membership. So I checked, and this one's free as well. I'm not sure how long they're free or anything like that if you do have an Audible membership, but this one was free as well, so I'm actually downloading that right now so I can listen to it while I work. I kill two birds with one stone, because I was thinking about what I wanted to listen to, and I was like, I don't really want to start another audiobook, and then I was like, you know what, like, I'm going to see if that's free at all, because Wild Seed was free, and I don't know if they're doing something because it's June or why they're free, but it is, so I'm downloading it. So I'm actually going to be listening to it, so I hopefully will have an update for you guys sooner, for me rather than later, even though for you guys it's just a moment. But yeah, if you're interested, like I said, I don't know how long it's going on, but if you have an Audible membership, definitely check and see, because it might be still free. So anyway, I'll check back in when I have more to report. All right, it's about, I don't know, probably around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, and I'm about halfway through Parable of the Sower. I've been listening to it. Like I said, I read the first 30 pages last night, and then I've been listening to it while I worked on my books, which I've kind of done what I wanted to do there. It's not perfect, but it's about as good as it's going to get right now. And so, listening, obviously kind of tuned in and out a little bit, but so far, really, really enjoying it. And where we're at right now is really good. I am going to have to kind of go into a little bit of spoilers, just because there's no way to really talk about this specific book without spoiling it at all, or trying to keep it spoiler light. So basically, they're in this community, and it's her and her father, and then her stepmom and her half brothers and such. And so she knows, like, it's getting more and more dangerous. Like, the outside world has been coming in a little bit. There's been break-ins and stealing and such. And so she's, trying to convince people, like, hey, we need to be prepared. Like, just because we're in this community does not make us safe. Nobody really wants to hear that. Her father's like, understands it, but at the same time, he's like, people will panic. Like, they don't want to hear that. She tries to tell her best friend, and it creates a big to-do. And it's just getting worse and worse. And so at the point where we're at right now, the community is basically attacked, and a bunch of them are killed and assaulted and killed and such. And so she does have hyper empathy as well, and so that does affect her. And she manages to get out, but she gets separated from her stepmom. Her dad disappeared at some point, so we don't know what happened to him. But she does get, her one brother wants to go live on the outside, and he does well for a little while, but then he shows up dead. And so at this point, it's just her stepmom and then her younger brothers, but they get separated. And she does find two members of her community. One she's known for a long time. One is kind of newer to the community, so she doesn't really know her all that well. And so they decide to team up, and she wants to go north. And she's kind of been thinking about this, having this plan. And now she's just kind of forced to act because of the attack on our community. So that's kind of where we're at this point. And race is starting to come in it now that they're in the outside world and traveling. The woman that she doesn't know very well is a black woman, and she's black, but the guy they're traveling with is a white man. And so the woman, was born on the outside, so she kind of knows a little bit more about it. And she's like, you two traveling together as a couple is going to create problems. But the main character plans on dressing as a man. And so she's like, well, if you want to come with us, then we'll be the couple, black man and woman's fine, and he can just be our friend. And so right now they're walking along the highway, and there's a lot of dangers around. And so yeah, I am really, really enjoying it, and I'll see going forward how much racism and such plays into it. But so far that has been like pretty non-existent. It does have a lot of like religion, because like I said, her dad was a Baptist preacher, and Harry, I don't like I said, because I was listening to it, I didn't fully grasp it. But one part, he's like, Zara stole peaches to feed them, and he's like, "Thou shalt not steal." Like that's part of the Bible, and so, that's gonna kind of play like she's like, "I'm doing what I need to do to survive," and he's like, "Well, I am too, but like I'm surprised at you because your dad was a preacher and he said this." So I don't know. I'm really enjoying it so far, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Like I said, I'm done in here. I'm planning on still listening to it though. I want to go ahead and play World of Warcraft with my husband, so I'll probably listen to it while we play. But again, I'm going to be kind of going in and out. And then whatever I don't finish while we're playing, I'll probably just finish in bed tonight. So next time I'll update you will probably be tomorrow when I finish this, because I doubt I will finish it before bedtime. And once I finish it, I will update you and kind of give you guys my final thoughts and wrap up this vlog. So yeah, that will be when you see me next. Alright, it is Sunday morning of June 9th, I think it is, and I have finished Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This was probably my least favorite of the 3 Octavia E. Butlers I read. I still gave it 5 stars. I still really enjoyed it. But part of it, I was kind of tuning in and out. I think if I had fully physically read it, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. I read the first 30 pages physically, and then I listened to the bulk of it, and then I kind of read along for the last little bit, but I did still really enjoy it. And so basically you have Lauren, and she lives in this gated community, or this walled off community, in this dystopian world where water is like pretty much non-existent. And it's really dangerous outside. It's very dystopian. There are a lot of dangers outside, people being murdered and assaulted and, all the things. And so, yeah, so she lives in this community. It's starting to kind of bleed in. The outside stuff, and so she's like, we need to be prepared, we need to be able to survive out there, we need to be prepared. Well, nobody wants to listen to her. She's a teenager, and so nobody wants to listen to her, and her father's like, yes, but people don't want to hear that, and you create panic. And so there's kind of issues with her own family in the beginning. Her stepmom is kind of like angry. Doesn't feel like the dad loves her children as much as he loves Lauren and such. And so there's a little bit issues there. One of her brothers ends up trying to go live on the streets and such, and so he ends up getting murdered, and then her father disappears, and all these things happen. Well, then the worst happens to the community. And so she ends up out on the streets, essentially, and she meets up with 2 other members of the community. Harry, who's somebody she grew up with, and then Zara, who I didn't really think it had touched on slavery at that point when I was at that point of the story, but Zara was actually sold to one of the members of the community as, it was also polygamy. He had multiple wives, and she was one of the wives. So basically sold into slavery to this guy. And so that's kind of how Zara was born on the outside and raised on the outside, but she was sold to this guy. So she is essentially a slave. And then later on, they end up kind of forming this ragtag group with other people, and there's 2 other people that were also slaves. So slavery does come into it, and the one character is like, it's like we went back 200 years, kind of nodding, to the original slavery, because the government is basically corrupt, and there is a government, but basically they're offering these jobs, but the jobs, they don't get paid. They get like credit to like the company's store or whatever to buy their things, so they don't actually get paid. and basically it's slavery. And they can never get out of debt, so they're just trapped in these situations. And then she's also has hyper empathy, and she calls it sharing. So she can share other people's pain mostly, and pleasure too. Um, and so she ends up, some of the other members also have the sharing. And it's really interesting though, because like it's like the slavers want that, like they kind of look for that, and you're more valuable if you have that and if your children have that. But I don't really understand why. So maybe that's something I would have picked up better if I had read it physically. I'm not really sure, but I really didn't fully understand that part of it. But yeah, and so they're basically traveling on this road. The one guy, they're heading north, and the one guy they meet up with actually has land in the north, and so they go up there. Um, but it's really dangerous on the road, thieves and such. And then there's also this drug that people take that make them like fascinated with fire, and so you have that danger as well. And they end up kind of on the wrong side of one of those groups. And so that's a danger as well. And so there's also fire plays a big role. She's a Lauren is her dad was a Baptist preacher, and then she's creating this kind of religion, cult, whatever, called Earthseed. And it was really interesting to read that, especially because in The Color Purple, you kind of had that component of religion. And even in Their Eyes Were Watching God, you had that as well. And so it's like very in tune to nature, and God is change, essentially. And God is not this entity, he's in everything, essentially. And so it's, about, it kind of goes back to like climate change as well. And it was really interesting because this was written in 1993, but takes place 2024 to 2027, mostly in 2027. But it was interesting seeing kind of the parallels of today's world with this. And so that was really interesting, especially like the fire component, because fires have definitely been getting out of hand. Yeah, it's not necessarily people being fascinated with fires, but our own carelessness and such. And so yeah, that was really kind of an interesting component to it. But yeah, I really really enjoyed all of these books. For sure, I had a really good time with all of them. I think everyone got 5 stars except for Their Eyes Were Watching God, and that's just because I really really struggled in the beginning of this book, as short as it is. But even so, all these were amazing, and I also read Wild Seed by Octavia E. Butler as well. Obviously, I don't have that one physically, but this was really really good, and they all touched on slavery in different ways, which was really interesting to see. Because they're all very very different, but there's definitely some similar themes as far as like slavery and as far as like religion and God and such. So very interesting. I'm so glad I was able to do this themed vlog, and read all these amazing books. I had such a great time with this. But yeah, I guess that's it from me. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you're interested in reading any of these. I would love to know that down in the comments below. And I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.